Today I'm trying to make a ceramic airtight container. I've made canisters with tight-fitting lids in a previous video, but they weren't truly airtight. But I think I've found a way. Let's see how we go. I'm using 500 grams of clay for the lid and about 1 kilo for the base. I could vary the height of the base by using more clay. I'm using a buff earthenware clay with a bit of tooth. I'm also going to use a silicone O-ring. You can find these online or at discount stores. I'll show you how that works a little later. So I'll start by making the base. At this point, you'll have to do some serious calculations because the 3 pieces have to work together: the base, the lid, and the silicone O-ring. There'll be some trial and error to get the sizing just right. I'm making my base 147mm wide. This will shrink down to about 132mm, round about 9% shrinkage. So I've centered the larger piece of clay and I'm ready to push down and open out. I trim around the outside base, giving the form a curved base. And I measure. Getting the measurements right is really critical to this project. Now for the lid. The lid is just slightly larger at about 152mm. So I center the clay. I flatten the clay and push down into the clay and bring the clay out. I bring the clay out to form a flange. The flange sits about 15mm from the edge. I make the flange about 10mm thick. Later I'm going to cut a channel for the O-ring based on its width. So I'll need to cut into the flange about 5mm. I trim and I give the lid and flange a final measure. And I set aside to dry to leather hard. Oh, because it's warm, I think they've gone a little over. So I'm ready to trim. I start around the outer edge. But I find the clay is a little too dry. So I take a damp sponge and hold it against the piece as I trim. So as I trim the clay, it cuts easier rather than just scraping away at the very dry clay. So this is simple trimming. Across the base for an indented base, and I've rounded the sides slightly. And then, as usual, I smooth the base This is the surface that contacts your furniture and countertops. And I trim the lid. I trim around the outside. And then I trim across the top. And then I smooth the top. And now I flip the lid and I'm going to cut a channel in the flange. So I'm using a very fine trimmer for this. So that the O-ring will fit, I need to make the channel about 5 mil into the flange. And that's pretty much it. So I check that the lid fits properly. And I tidy up the channel with a brush. And I'm ready to dry these pieces and then bisque. So I start glazing by glazing the inside of the base. So I pour into the base and then pour out. And after a quick cleanup, I do the same for the lid. Then I take the lid and glaze the top. I'm using an opaque white glossy glaze. Finally, I take the base that's had its interior already glazed and I glaze the outside by dipping carefully up to the rim. And I clean the base. And then I'm ready to set the two together to fire. And I glaze fire the lid and base together. So I fit the O-ring into the channel that I've carved. This one has two little holes that allow the displaced air to escape, and it closes super well. I'm really pleased with the fit. And I can lift the container up by the lid. I think if airtight is a must, then this is a doable way of achieving it. This is a project that requires significant effort to get it right. Let me say, this is the third try. Of course, I could use any of the ones that didn't turn out as cute plant pots. And if just fitting well is good enough for what you need, then check out my canister video. And as always, happy potting!